Röckët Stähr, first off, I love the name. Thank you so much for doing this interview because I remember seeing a screener for your film, Death of a Rock Star, last year, and it surprised me. The scope and everything that went into this project is just amazing. So before we even get into it, I just want to say I'm very impressed with the outcome of what you've done with this movie. It is just impressive for all the work that you put into it,
Well, thank you.
but doing it yourself, you
I
know.
really appreciate hearing that, Mark. It was a hell of a process, and I had no idea it was going to be like that when I started. But I saw it through, and so when I've been getting feedback like that
Mm,
recently, and particularly when I've actually started promoting it and putting it out
sure.
there in like the strongest push I've ever done, it's been really just wonderful to finally get that appreciation and people just enjoying it, and admiring what I did and what I put into it. So it's been
It,
great.
it is an impressive project, and if you wouldn't mind telling my listeners, shame on you who haven't looked it up already before checking out this interview. In your words, could you give a bit of a synopsis of what Death of a Rock Star is about?
Ah, okay. It's basically it's a group of underground. The year is 2164. It takes place in the future, and it's a time when rock and roll has been banned and other forms of just fun things to do, probably like, I don't know, vibrators and stuff like that, or probably, there's, I think, is a, one scene where there's a pyre burning in there, you kind of throwing stuff in there, and you might not notice, but at one point, a giant dildo gets thrown onto the fire. There's like little things like that. So anyway, it's kind of a time where like the left and the right, the extreme sides have kind of come together and realize, really, we just both want to control people in different ways. So why don't we get together and do it as one joyous, authoritarian regime? So anyway, this underground group of rebels led by a creator, kind of a mad scientist guy, creates this rock star who's partly a clone of the creator, and sends them out on a guerrilla tour. And the plan is to kind of wake the masses up free, by shocking them with this rock and roll stuff that they've never ever heard before. And in the meantime, he's going to give them a book that kind of expresses freedom. And I don't want to give away too much more than that, but
No,
suffice it to say, I always say it's sort of like the best laid plans of mice and men, you know, often go awry, and this one does as well. So,
it's a bit of
so
a Frankenstein story, a
yeah.
bit of Rocky Horror in there.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I also want to kind of put across, because I mentioned the political aspect of it, and it's
mhm.
it's it's yes, it's kind of it has my views and my kind of take on stuff, but I don't feel it's preachy. And what I wanted to do with it is make sure that it was just fun. So whether or not you agree with some of the things that are said in it here and there, that you can just be like, well, I don't agree with that, but man, this is colorful, and boy, I like those sounds. And oh, was that the Mary Tyler Moore logo there going through the like a fun? I want it to be fun, so you don't have to sit there and be like, you're being lectured to or anything. So I just want to make that clear that it's meant to be that way.
And it is fun. I found a lot of fun in it. I actually just rewatched it here before the interview just to refresh myself on it and catching a lot more the second time around because you have a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of references in a good way. I love when movies do that because rewatchability, you're like, first time around, you're not sure what to expect. So you're going through and you're like, oh, okay, we're getting into this. And then the second time, you know what to expect. So then you can pay attention a little bit more to the details in everything here and the sheer amount of references, not only rock references, but pop culture references as well, is massive. I'm like, you're talking to me. You're talking. It's like I recognize everything being presented in here, from Planet of the Apes reference to
Right.
Singing in the Rain to, you
And I
know,
don't doubt it. I see the stuff behind you there,
yeah.
and I have that very ACDC T-shirt actually for "Who
Oh,
Made
you
Who."
do.
I
You
love "Who
do.
Made Who." It's one of my favorite ACDC songs. That's probably not a very popular opinion. And
Oh
yeah,
no, I,
the movies behind you, so I'm sure you caught so many of the little references. Because it's both a love letter to rock and roll and in general to 20th century American pop culture.
yeah.
So there's a lot of little pop culture references in there, that some kids may get or may not, but they might because they go back and explore stuff themselves. So I don't, want to discount that.
Well, there's been a resurgence. I mean, we've seen it recently how in the last 3 years, vinyl has outsold CDs now.
Mhm.
And kids are discovering older vinyls, older rock albums now, and they're like, oh, bands they never heard of before. And so it is kind of this resurgence again of discovering these classics that have influenced both of us and all. I mean, listening to your music in Death of a Rock Star, I'm listening to it, and especially this time around too, catching it again, going, oh, well, there's some ELO in there. There's some Freddie Mercury in here. There's
Right.
some Meatloaf with Jim Steinman in there.
Tattoo there.
Oh, that's a wonderful tattoo.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm catching all these references where, were these the artists that have influenced you in your art so far? These classic
Well,
rock.
yeah, I mean, obvious Freddie Mercury is my
Sure.
musical hero, so he's a Queen has been a lifelong love of
Hmm.
mine. It's funny you mention ELO because I love ELO and Jeff Lynne, and I'm a big fan, but I had never previously considered myself to be influenced by them
Okay.
until other people pointed it out to me, and that might seem odd. And I
Sure.
think maybe the reason is because my favorite band is the Beatles. They're number one
Mm-hmm.
for everyone. I'm a hard
Right.
rock guy and
Sure.
and metal, but I'm a '60s guy too, and the Beatles are my big love, and so they're very influential on a lot of my music. And if you listen to ELO, quite obviously they're a huge influence on Jeff Lynne. I mean, there's so much of the Beatles is in
Oh yeah.
ELO's music. Can't get you out of my can't get you out of my
Can't get
head.
my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's Lennon all over it, right? It's like the best song John Lennon ever wrote. And so I guess that's probably where it kind of comes through. It's probably me trying to do the Beatles like Jeff Lynne was trying to do the Beatles. And since I had orchestration to it,
Sure.
that sounds like ELO. But I'm
Right.
very happy to say yes, ELO influence because it's probably subconscious anyway
Sure.
because I listen to them a ton and I love them.
And it's not a bad band to have an influence either.
Hell
So,
no. Oh, Jeff Lynne is fucking amazing. I mean, really, just even the stuff that he's produced outside of ELO, I love.
mhm.
I'm a big Tom Petty fan, and I
Sure.
love that stuff, and
Mhm.
the stuff he did with the Wilburys. I
Oh
love
yeah.
all that, and George Harrison's Cloud Nine. Yeah, he's an amazing artist. I'm going to see him in September with Jeff Lynne's ELO.
Awesome.
Looking forward to
Oh,
that.
that should be a fun time, definitely. So, what made you want to endeavor on this? Because film is tough and
Insanity.
is making a film is insane.
Yeah.
And I've been involved both in front and behind the camera. I've talked to many indie filmmakers, and everyone says that part is common. Making a film's insane. You got to be kind of crazy to do it. But then on top of that, you're doing a fully animated, full rock opera. And folks, when I say rock opera, I mean there are 2 lines of spoken dialogue, I think, in the entire thing. Otherwise, it's all sing song, which is wonderful. Um, and doing this wild art. I mean, what made you want to do this?
I said insanity.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and God, there's so many reasons. It's like
Sure.
sometimes people ask me and I answer one thing, but then it's also another. And so they're like, you answered that way before. I'm like, yeah, but it's kind of both and then some. There was a lot of it had to do with at the time, you know, I had done so many different types of music, and I had gone and done a live show with strings and horns and stuff like that. And the show went well, but at the end of the day, I'd spent like $1,000 on the show, and what did I have really to show for it?
Sure.
I was like, if I'm going to continue to pump this kind of money into my music, I might as well make something that's a little bit more to posterity, so I can
Sure.
kind of you know, show it to
Hmm.
people afterwards or do something with it, beyond just one night. So I decided to, at the time, I was just going to record like a whole bunch of my songs because I'd done a ton of different bands over the years. I'd done kind of the very, the orchestral rock kind of thing in the 90s, but then I also had a punk band. I also had just a regular rock band. I did a more of a singer songwriter kind of thing on the guitar with just a friend banging on some drums in the background. So I'd kind of done the gamut. So I had a bunch of songs from a bunch of different types of things. I said, well, why don't I take a few of each, and I'll just make one big thing. And then I kind of thought, well, for years people have been telling me that I should do a rock opera.
Mhm.
And so that's when the ball got rolling, where I was like, well, why don't I do that? Let me see if, my friend can write a story for me,
Sure.
my friend Phil is a filmmaker, and Phil Laco. And and so I kind of asked him, and he was kind of like, well, it's interesting, but he's a busy guy. It's like, hey,
Sure.
write a story for me. Listen to all these songs and then see what you can come up with. But it's like, so he wasn't terribly interested. And
Sure.
so then I went on my own and was kind of one day just sort of thinking about it. And I was going to meet my wife for dinner, and I was waiting for the subway. And I live in New York City, and that's
Sure.
what we do here. We wait for the subway.
You wait for the subway, yeah.
It takes about 90% of our life living in New York City is waiting for the subway. So I'm standing there, and just suddenly, it's almost like 80% of the story just kind of popped into my head.
Sure.
And I went, oh, I have a song that would be perfect for this. Oh, I have one perfect for that scene. And oh, and there's one that I've been thinking about that if I finish it will work great there. And by the time I got to meet her for dinner, I was like, I got a great idea. Listen to this story. And I told her, and I'm telling you, it was about 80, probably about 80% of what the general
Sure.
story of what you see there
Mhm.
was right there. And a lot of those songs had already been written. Yeah, I'd say about maybe 70%,
Mhm.
60% of the songs were fully written. Maybe that's a little high. And others were ideas I'd had floating around for years, and a few I wrote specifically for it for certain scenes. So anyway, I feel like I'm getting way off track again.
No, not all. You're good. You're all good.
So yeah, so that was like one of the things, and that kind of sort of started pushing me to be. But at the time, I didn't know it was going to be an animated
Sure.
rock opera. That was not the game plan from the beginning. It was just like, oh, I'm going to write the story, I'm going to record like a concept album, double record, rock opera, and I'll do that for a bunch of years or whatever.
Sure.
Um, and I started floating around the ideas in my head. Well, what would I do if I wanted to film it? Would I do puppets, or would I try to get actors, or like, I don't know how eventually I got into the idea of animation,
Mhm.
but I did. And the intention was never for me to animate it, let alone animate it all on my own. I'm
Sure.
not quite that crazy. I mean, it was like, I'm going to make a 26-song rock opera and I'm going to do it all on my own. It just sort of played out that
Sure.
way, like during the 5 years or whatever it took me to record the songs,
Mhm.
because again, that was all stuff I was doing on my own too, and
Right.
all the strings, horns, woodwinds, drums, piano, those are all live in the studio. Overdub, but there are all
Sure.
live players in the studio. I'm the one who played the piano, um, and so each time I'd have to save up. I'd have to work for months and months. Write the parts for the strings or whatever. Save up for a session. Go do the session. I got great. I got strings for 3 of the songs. Or 5 or whatever it
Sure.
was. And so it took a long time to get all that together, and then back, God, this is like late 2000s, early 2010s, and the home recording technology wasn't all that up to snuff.
No.
It was there, but it's come a dramatically long way since in that short period of time. So I had this little thing called an M box, and I just kind of
Mhm.
recorded all my guitars and bass in there. It sounded kind of crappy, but it worked for what I needed to do. And um, yeah, so that was kind of during all that time I was recording it. I started like I wrote the script
Mm.
like when I have some free time. Eventually, I wrote a whole script, and I started shopping it around to animation houses. Like, hey, here's a couple songs. I got a couple of songs done.
Yeah.
Script. How would you be interested in animating this? And I was so naive to
Yeah.
understand. You know, what an ask that is. And they'd be like, yeah, we're interested. How many millions of dollars do you have? And I'm like,
Well,
zero. And they're like, well, thanks. Good luck to you. And then I'd try to contact
Mhm.
indie animators. I'd go on
Sure.
YouTube and find somebody with a style that I really dug. And I'd email them thinking like, oh, maybe they'd be interested in working with me on this project. And same thing. They're like, oh, this is really cool, but I've got a life, and and this is my project, so I'm not gonna, you have no
Yeah.
idea how hard it is to animate. And I didn't. And you can tell somebody how hard it is and all that. And people told me, but you kind of don't realize until you're doing it.
Right.
And so I ended up at a point where the music was largely recorded and I was still trying to figure out how to get it, done. So
Mhm.
I figured, well, maybe I'll buy an animation program just so I can kind of illustrate some scenes
Oh, sure.
and make a whole package to
Hmm.
try to shop for financing
Hmm.
to then get and pay someone to get animated. But I figured, we had to at least show them the vision. They can hear the sounds, the script, but show them what it might look like. And I'm not an illustrator. I used to draw in high school. I was a good portrait artist, but I was never good at cartooning. I was never at all good at that kind of thing. My brother was. I wasn't. I was more of a realistic kind of drawer. And so I started sketching out characters in a sketchbook first. And actually, on the Blu-ray you have, I don't know if you
Yeah,
checked
yeah.
out any of
I
the bonus
I did
features.
check out those drawings.
Yeah,
Were
so it's got
amazing.
some of
Those.
those original drawings that I did, which were much more realistic versions of the characters, and then eventually I got the software and I started kind of transferring that to screen and thinking like, well, how would this work for animating? You got to simplify the lines and stuff. So
Right.
anyway, I drew a couple of the scenes, and in one scene I got to, and I think I might talk about this on the
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 commentary.
voiceover
Yeah.
version of the
Hmm.
movie. But there's a point in the second song where it's an army character or a guy who's going to be turned into an army guy.
Right.
He
Yep.
gets thrown through the air and he lands and they rip his clothes off or whatever. And I was just drawing that scene because again, I had drawn like 5 or 6 images from the first couple of songs, and I was like, this program, it's kind of easy to just move this like little thing like that. So maybe that would be even more impressive, so they can understand what's going on there without these things coming out of the side. I'll just maybe make some little things, and so I did, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Look at that. That thing went like that. And it became one of those things where like I always liken it to this. If something's really dirty, and you just kind of like you just decided for something was bothering you, clean it.
Yeah.
Oh, now I have to clean the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you start cleaning more, and then you kind of do more, and like suddenly you're like you got this giant task on your shoulders. You should have just left it dirty in the first place. It's sort of the same thing. I just never touched it, just let it flat. So yeah, 8 years later, I had a movie to oversimplify what went on from there. Yeah.
Well, it's very impressive, and you can't tell. I mean, I think it's got its own unique style and visual identity, and working in those, replicating those references too, those pop culture references couldn't have been exactly easy either to do, like you had it there.
Oh,
Uh,
that's one of those things that, if you ever read the script, which you probably won't,
oh,
or and no one probably ever will, but it's like beat for beat, it goes along with, what the story is of the
sure,
movie.
yeah. Mhm.
But I never really referenced the damn thing when I was doing there were certain scenes where I knew exactly how it was going to go, so I didn't have to. But
Sure.
other things, it was just like, I wrote them in the script without thinking, oh, that would be a pain in the ass to draw or to, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. And instead, I'd wake up each morning and it was like freestyle animation. Like
Sure.
I'd kind of listen to what the lyrics were saying, if they reminded me of a movie or a TV show or where something was going, and one idea would lead to the other. And since I wasn't working with a team, you don't have to have it all laid out ahead of time. I just have to know where I'm going and try
Right.
to figure out a way to eventually get there. There's once, and sometimes I fuck that up along the way and have to find solutions, which ended up being, kind of creative too. Like there's one scene where the female character Ronnie Way ends up on a cliff, and she's
Mhm.
upset. And she's on a cliff, and eventually, Rocky Star has to come up to her and and make her feel better. In the script, she's at the edge of a beach,
Mm.
which they're on,
Right.
but she climbs up to the cliff near the beach. And so I had to, so I did that and then forgot. I was like, oh shit, how am I going to get her up to her on that cliff within like 3 or 4 seconds that he's got to get up there? And that's why I just, it's like, oh, it's a cartoon. He can just pull umbrellas out of his hair and
Sure.
the wind can take him away since it's called Umbrella, the song.
Yeah.
So it's like little things like that. Like it kind of like, you just have to open your mind to being like, this is animation. I can do
Hmm.
anything. Anything will work. And so there were really no rules. And if I saw something that reminded me of a movie or a TV show or
Hmm.
a band or whatever, I just put it in there and to entertain myself partly too. So yeah, that's kind of I forget what the question even.
No, no, no,
If there was
that's
even a question, I probably interrupted you and just kind of started rambling like I often do.
oh, not at all. No, it's all great stuff. Yeah, I mean, your animation style in this, I think fits the retro theme too. I've seen the description as kind of Yellow Submarine meets Rocky Horror of sorts,
Yeah,
and it's kind of got that that style to it, but it fits the whole overall theme of the future rediscovering the past.
yeah, yeah.
The
And
past
that's a
art.
happy accident too.
Hmm.
That's because I sucked. And I had never animated anything before in my life. Because originally, the things that I'm not a big animation guy, but there's some stuff that I absolutely love, like the movie Heavy Metal, which I'm
Mm.
sure you know.
Oh man,
Love
yeah.
it, which sometimes people ask me, why does Ronnie Way have such big boobs? I'm like, an homage to things like the Heavy Metal cartoon and rock and roll cliches and the mag, like that's the whole point of it. Plus, it's fun to draw big boobs. But
It is. Yeah.
so of course it is. Everyone, little kids do it. Everyone does it. So the point is, when I was originally conceiving that, and the animation in the wall is so fucking cool.
Oh yeah.
What's his name? Gerard Scalf or something like that. Did the animate? I forget his
Yeah, I
name.
forgot his name. Yeah.
It's on the bonus features
Hmm.
on the movie. But so I wanted, if I had my druthers, the animation would have been along the lines of those two types of things, much more dramatic, cool, hand drawn. But I don't have any druthers. I only have me, and I didn't have millions of dollars and all that. So I had to try to think, well, how can I do this? I'm not a very good illustrator and more basic. I was like, well, I love Yellow Submarine, and that's something I can take influence from and sort of try
Nice.
to see, well, how did their things look and how did their characters move, you know? So that's kind of how that ended up being. It's kind of again like just kind of a trying to push my limitations as much as I could, and so I tried to find something that because you're usually doing that with art, right? You're trying to find something you can relate to,
Sure.
then take influence from, and create something new with. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I did with this.
And I mean, people, you hear it left and right that there's no new ideas, left. It's just how you tell your story. And you've got a very interesting story here, especially with the way, not only the way you tell it, but just the story itself. At first, it starts off like, oh, here, rock and roll, put your horns up and get your hair out, and get your eyeshadow going, and that's what this is going to be about. It's going to end, with this whole rock thing, like like something with American, I forgot what it's called. A number of the other animated films from Bakshi and that the names escape
Yeah,
me
I know
right
which
now.
one you're talking about. American. Yeah,
I
there's like a jazz band in, I think, and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, I can't believe I blanked on that. But yeah, so you think it's going to be kind of like that, and then it takes this turn. Your story takes this turn when you get to the probably one of the heaviest songs in this film, which reminded me a bit. I don't know if you listen to blues, but there's a more recent blues by the late Buddy Richard was the Gunsmoke Blues, and it reminded me a lot of that to where you get this song about guns and and
oh,
how
Man with a Gun. Yeah,
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 man with a gun. And in Rockstar, Death of a Rockstar, and I was like, man, this is heavy, and then that's where the film kind of turns to where you're looking at it going, you know, being a pop star may be another flavor of the same thing,
yeah,
the rock star worship. And I loved that angle that you took with it because I don't think that's really expected, that you're going to kind of present both sides
yeah,
of the story.
mhm, yeah.
I mean, and you see that now. I mean, we'll invoke her name, Taylor Swift. But you kind of have that message in here, don't you, with the Rockstar song, especially Rocky's last song in here. Not to spoil too much, but the last song on the movie kind of gives that message to the audience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's anything if you follow it too blindly or too religiously is pop stars or politicians.
Mm.
It can lead to some pretty bad outcomes. And you're just follow.
Right.
I look. Everyone's got to do their own thing, but that's exactly what I'd like them to do. Do their
Mhm.
own thing, take influence, and I mean, I absolutely love and can call my favorite rock stars gods or whatever and stuff like that. But like, I won't follow them blindly. I love
Right.
their music and I will follow
Mhm.
their music and what they do. But there's plenty of things that I'll disagree with them on. And if I don't like a song or an album, I won't be afraid to say I don't like it or
Sure.
fear that I'm going to upset the rest of the audience or community and stuff. Yeah, oh, I'm tempted to give more of my opinions on certain things, but I also try to, I kind of stop myself to some degree, unless I'm in
Mhm.
private talking,
Oh
but,
yeah, sure. Yeah.
because I kind of think of like, because my fan base has been kind of expanding lately,
Mhm.
and to a lot of fans that I would have never thought would have been into what I do, and it's been very humbling.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say I take any responsibility because of that, because I don't think that's right to think of like you're just making music and there's no
Right.
responsibility to it or an artist. But I try to think of like how I would have been as a fan
Mhm.
especially when I was younger or something. And it's like, you know, I was Guns N' Roses was the band that, blew blew me into rock
Sure.
and roll or it made me a huge wanting to make music and stuff. And if I watched an interview with Axel and Slash and they started giving their opinion on, like, international affairs or something like that, or it just kind of would have been like, I just want to hear you talk about rock and roll and, and all the drugs you do and all the women you banged or whatever. It's like,
Throwing
that's what I
baloney,
want to,
throwing
yeah,
baloney on people.
yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of, my fans who are big Taylor Swift fans.
Sure.
I not necessarily. I have nothing
Mhm.
against her or anything like that, but there are certain things about the fandom or about the
Mhm.
press and things that does rub me the wrong way. But I'm reluctant to talk
Well, no, I wasn't
that, which is
necessarily.
odd for a guy who's very into freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. But it's sort of and it's not that kind of thing. I'm not afraid what somebody will do to me. I just try to look at things from a fan perspective as often as I
Oh,
can,
sure.
and how I'd like to be towards people who might be my fans as well. If that makes
And
any sense
and I
at all.
and I wasn't, because I don't want to get canceled by Swifties, but no, I have a lot of friends, and I enjoy Taylor Swift's music too. I was more just it was more along the angle of how you presented how people can gravitate and start to worship rock stars like they worship other things. And we see that in the real life. As I was just giving an example, whether it's positive or negative, it's still one of those things to where it's this this like entity, this this thing that just gets a mind of its own, and it's interesting to see followers of Rockstar, take it to different levels. I mean, we've seen it all through history, and you even reference it in the film a bit. Lennon and some other folks
Yeah. Mhm.
who went so far that it ended up getting a negative impact. There's a lot of positive impact with following artists, but like you say, yeah, when it gets into political views, talk about what you guys did behind the stage between
Right,
sets, you know?
yeah, it's like, and quite frankly, that's what I find fascinating about musicians and rock stars. Anyway, it's like
Mhm.
I didn't buy Appetite for Destruction, thinking, I wonder what these guys think about world trade. Like that's just not what I heard. Welcome to the Jungle. What got me off about it? I was like, wow, these guys really live in the street. I want to hear how they all lived in one house and things were crazy and in the Hell House and like that's what you're there for. And I
Mhm.
kind of feel like it's taking advantage a little bit of your audience when then you go, oh, I've got you here. Well, now I've got you
Yeah.
here. I'm gonna now preach to you about this and that and the other thing. I mean, it's one thing when you're somebody like, a Neil Young or whatever, where
Sure.
that's who's been from the beginning. Like, if
Mhm.
if you're shocked at Neil Young's political in his music or what he's going to say on the stage, and I
You
don't know what
weren't
he's been
paying attention. Yeah.
years, but when it comes from, we keep saying Taylor Swift, and I don't think
But no.
does it or whatever, but like
Mhm.
somebody like that, it's like, sure, in your private life, whatever and stuff, but maybe keep it off the stage and don't
But
preach to people. I don't know. That's just my personal take on it. I'm sure everybody's got
yeah. Well,
their
no, I
own
mean,
about
we've
it.
seen it. We've seen it with rock stars. I mean, Ted Nugent and Kid Rock to an extent. They've
Yeah,
thrown their hat in the political ring with their angle on it. And so, not just to
Roger
say,
Waters
huh?
Roger Waters is an
Yeah.
extreme version of it, and that's mind you, that's just kind of that's also just one of the messages in the movie. It's kind of layered even in the
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
department of that, as far
Hmm.
as like, one of the messages is to not, it's it's hard to discuss it without giving too much away, but there's an irony that you can kind of see right from the
Hmm.
beginning that the creator is his name, is trying to wake people free from tyranny, yet at the same time he's trying to control the life of his creation, as
So,
opposed
yeah.
to being like, well, of course you made this sentient being, you had a plan for him, but maybe that wasn't his plan, like
Right.
that's not what he wants for himself. And so that's one of the deep central to me messages in it as well. There's layers like that in there.
Oh, yeah.
Here's another fun little layer for you.
Sure.
Is that in a very strange way and very esoteric, it's a little bit autobiographical to a degree, because one of the whole points of it, you asked earlier, and I said, yeah, there's different reasons I did this or whatever.
Hmm.
And one was that, I was getting kind of a little older. I say older now, which is ridiculous to think. I was in like my early or mid 30s when I started doing this.
Sure.
Um, and I thought, I'm probably not going to go on tour or anything like that. What if I make this creation that I could send out on tour for me? And I had been just becoming, I'm not to get again into the political too much,
No.
but I'm extremely libertarian
Hmm.
kind of guy. And I was like, well, this would be great if, like, this could have sort of like, things about freedom and all these things that I want to talk about liberty wise, and I can send that out along with the music,
The music. Yeah.
basically the plot of what's going on here. I'm actually creator, and Rocky Star and the band is actually the movie.
Yeah.
There's a very meta aspect of it
Hmm.
like that, where it's like it's self-referential, and of course then to tweak myself, because it's fun to make fun of yourself. Of course everything has to go wrong. It wasn't going to work out that way,
Well,
and what I'm thinking was going to happen with it wasn't going to work out that way, like, so that's another kind of layer of what's going on plot wise in it.
and I loved that angle with it as well because if you watch and read enough stories and just experience enough real life,
So,
you can have pie in the sky expectations and everything could start out good, but rarely do you get to point A and planned point B. You usually take a squiggle and end up somewhere completely different, good or bad, with what your intentions were, and that's what you have here. And I like the creator character too, the doctor, because I mean, you you have your, you know it, a lot of the characters in here are like aren't necessarily good or bad. They're people, except for the czar, except for the controlling, folks who are enslaving
oh,
people and
and I'll
sending
tell
them to
you, in an
war.
earlier version of it,
Hmm.
in a draft of it, and I don't know if the script was like this or it was just a draft I had. The Czar was actually the brother of Creator,
Oh,
and one of the things that was supposed to go on was to sort of show how it can go, because Creator, you would end up seeing his parents. He was actually kind of rescued, and
sure.
all this stuff happened even before the Czar, and he was rescued and became that, and it kind of shows how the
Hmm.
nurture thing, you can become two different things. I dropped that subplot eventually because, again, you can only throw so much shit in there. And it was like, when you're animating, like, that's not really going to work. I won't do that. But that was actually one of the things to, again, make it like what you said, like these are all just people thrust into this world. And reality wise, so was the Czar,
Right.
Czar. He was also initially in the script. You just don't end up seeing it in the movie.
But yeah, I mean, I just love all the influences that you have in here and the themes and the layers. The music is great. I enjoy it a lot, especially like I said on the rewatch. Especially, I picked up a lot more, and with what you're doing musically here with the lyrics, and I liked the parts where you're displaying the words as they're being sung. Did that just kind of flow naturally? Where you're like, oh, this would be great if I put it as words, or was there another reason behind it, or was it more just, oh, this would just really fit this song?
For some reason, when I first did that, it was for the very first song I animated, which was the second song in the movie. And it's literally like I mentioned to you, it's
Yeah,
literally some of the very first stuff I ever animated, which I actually went back and didn't change the animation, but I was able to upgrade it because it took so long to program. Got 90 times better over those 8 years. So I
sure.
was like, well, now I have to go back and fix this or it won't look as good as the end. Um, so I had done that with certain lyrics for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. And when I was kind of first doing that, I got together with my friend Phil, who I told you I was
Right.
going to try to get to write the script. And he's always been a fan of my music. And he was like, "Oh, what have you been doing lately?" And I was like, "Well, I did this animated thing, and I was probably going to make a movie." And he saw it and he loved it. And he's like, You've got to finish this. You have to actually
Right.
really do this." And I was like, "All right." So him and he's a filmmaker, and his producer Eisen came on board. At the time, it was supposed to be as producers, sort of. Ultimately, they ended up being consultants, basically. That you see them listed at the end of the movie. And when I was moving forward with it, I had the decision to make pretty quickly. I was like, well, I had the lyrics on the screen here, and I don't know if I'm going to continue doing it that way or not. And they were like, oh, no, no, you should. That's
Mhm.
cool. It looks really cool that way. Continue that way. So I was like, all right, you guys like it, I'll do it. So that was sort of like, sort of
Sure.
team decision right there. So that's why I did it. But there are two songs
Hmm.
because again, there were no rules
Sure.
since I didn't have
Yeah.
to answer to anybody, except sometimes my friend Philip, he was like, yeah, this
Yeah.
isn't coming across, change it, which was great because bouncing it off somebody who would say, he would never tell me what
Mhm.
to do or I couldn't do something,
Right.
but he would just say, yeah, you have to make this show more so people understand that or do that and something. And so, but there were two scenes, the Turn It Up Loud scene and
Hmm.
60 Summer Heartbreak, where when I was doing them, it just didn't feel right to put the lyrics on there because I felt like the actual scene, it just expressed things in a different way than some of the other
Sure.
scenes did. And they weren't quite as much plot forward type scenes as this is what's going on right here, right now.
Sure.
And that totally makes sense. But just something about it when I was doing it, I was like, I don't think these need the lyrics. People get what's going on here. It's just it kind of in a way. I started doing it for I think 60 More Heartbreak, and I just felt like it kind of got in the way.
Hmm.
Once in a while, like the ground opens up and you'll see like I
Yeah.
can't get over here, something like that. So there's a couple words in there, but like I just kind of had to go with does this feel right when I'm watching it? Does it not feel right? Does it get in the way? And so yeah, it's for like 90% of the movie, except for those two songs.
Well, it gives your world your own identity, and that's one of the things that I thought was impressive as well, is that you do a very good job of building your world fairly quickly of what everything's taking place in, because I think world building, I think people don't realize how much of a challenge that can be when you're doing something like you are, set in such a surreal world that you've got to come up with, some things. And as you said, you're doing it all yourself, so you didn't have to have someone say, well, you can't really do that. You're like, well, I'm going to make this psychedelic colors come out of his head at one point,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, I didn't have
um,
to run it by anybody or
mhm,
make sure we all coordinated because someone else is doing the background and this is going to go on. And it was just like, nah, this would be like the psychedelic thing. At the end there, I was thinking like, oh shit, I just touched my face and I have makeup on
oh,
it. You have no idea how often that happens.
oh, I've,
Um, yeah, that scene was inspired by like the '60s psychedelic art, like what's his name? He did that famous Dylan poster. Is it Milton
oh,
Glaser? I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that with with all
Hmm.
the lines and stuff coming out of Bob's hair. That's what inspired that. That was where and Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Bob at the end. So that was where that came from. And again, it's like one of those things where I could do it, and if I'm hearing that in the music and it feels right, I'm like, yeah, let me see if I can pull that off.
and and you do pull it off, but I think that part and just everything in general, you give this world its own feel and its own identity. and that helps the audience get into it. I mean, you get into it. You have a little bit of a Rocky Horror type thing with lips on the globe in the beginning there,
Yeah.
but you kind of know what you're in for right away. And I think once you set that expectation, it helps people relax, going, "Oh, I can just kind of let go and just let things come to me rather than, oh, well, that's not realistic looking or something." You kind of know what you're going into, and giving it that kind of free spirit, like the whole movie has,
Yeah.
and give that to your audience. I, and I don't want to go too long for you or keep you too long. I'm sure the makeup is probably you'd be willing to get rid of it, but
So used to it at this point, I might as well just go to bed with it. You know?
but for your female lead, because you do not, nearly all the vocals, but you do have a female lead character in here, and you have the vocals. How did you go about finding your lead singer for her?
Oh, I put a lot of leads out on
Hmm.
that. I just went on Facebook and was like, "Hey, anybody know a good female singer?" Great, I have a lot of musician friends and
Hmm.
in the city and stuff like that. And I got God, I don't remember how many. It must have been close to 30 references and people sending me clips of who might work
Sure.
and who might
Yeah.
not. And yeah, eventually, there was a lot of them were really good, a lot of really
Hmm.
good singers, but you needed somebody with just the right of what I wanted. So you've got something in your
Yeah.
head. And the oboe player in the movie, Katie Shield, she was like, "I know a great singer. Um, you should check her out. Her name is Abby Ahmad." And I think she might have sent me, either she hooked me up like through Facebook with
Sure.
Abby, or she sent me a clip of her singing with a Pink Floyd cover band, doing the greatest gig in the sky, the great gig in the sky,
Sure.
and she fucking nailed it. It was like, that ain't no easy thing to sing,
Right.
and it was like on YouTube, and I was like, wow. And then I think I heard her doing some other covers of Zeppelin or something like
Sure.
that, or I forget what it was, but that was the one that I was like, if she can sing like that, then she'll be able to do what I did or what I want
Hmm.
from her voice and stuff. And yeah, so I asked her, and she was totally into it. I sent her the songs, and she loved them. And I've literally only met her once. We're still Facebook friends, but it was just one night, one session.
Sure.
She did her 2.5 songs,
Hmm.
and I've never had somebody else sing my music. I've never had to. I've written
Sure.
orchestrations, even the drums in the movie. I first programmed them into a drum machine, then gave them to a drummer. I was like, you have to play this exactly like that. So I've worked with other musicians, but I've never had to work with a singer where I'm trying to convey to them, I want it to sound like this. So
Right.
I sang on the demos as much as I could have, because originally there were songs I wrote for myself anyway. So they're a little bit more in my range. Oh, they push the top end a little bit. And I was like, the inflections I'm doing here, here, and here, that's what I want. But if you have other ideas, I'm open to them. So in the studio, um, she was amazing. She took, because I never directed anybody, and I'm sure it could be a little insulting as a singer. Somebody's like, "No, can you put a little more this
Yeah.
on that, a little more, push that note right there, and sing this one a little softer, or no, can you maybe slur that line and glide?" So it's like every little thing, and she just took it all in and pulled it every single thing off. There wasn't one thing I remember ever asking of her where I was like, "She didn't quite get that. That's not really what I wanted," and I couldn't be happier with what she did on it. Like love it. Love her voice on there.
Did she know how her character was going to be drawn?
I think so, yeah,
Yeah.
because by the time she came on to sing her songs, I don't know if the movie was totally complete animated wise
Sure.
or partially. I'd have to look that up myself because I can't remember. But that's one thing about it. Even like before people played on it, I always told them what it was about in general.
Sure.
And then I had kind of, my political views, my
Sure.
libertarian kind of views, and that wasn't over the top with it or anything like that, but just, because I wouldn't want somebody being part of something that they don't feel comfortable with.
Right.
I'm a everything goes fucking kind of guy, comedy or whatever. I am against any kind of censorship or telling people they can't say what they want to say or this and that and the other thing. But
Same
if you
here.
be involved in it. I wouldn't want somebody seeing in my movie and then feeling like, oh, I don't like how that character looks on the screen with my voice over it,
Yeah.
or I don't want my trumpet on a movie that's about it has a big thing about freedom of speech at the end or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I'm always conscious about that kind of thing, and then everybody was like, oh, I don't give a shit. I just want to play. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's totally cool. Yeah, it just sounds great. And I'd love to be a part of the project. And, you know,
well,
maybe
that
now
is.
she regrets it. I have no idea.
Well, if you're still Facebook friends, maybe you're probably still good.
Yeah,
You're probably
that's true.
still
Yeah,
good.
she hasn't, hidden from me. And Facebook friends are my real personal
Sure.
profile, not my artist one. I get,
Right. Yeah.
more, say what I believe on there more.
Oh
So,
yeah.
if you think I'm annoying now, you should
I I
see
don't
my
think
personal Facebook page.
I don't think you're annoying at all. I think it's a very creative endeavor. It's a very unique project. I enjoyed it even more, like I said, second time around watching it. And I think you've really got something here that's unique with your own identity, but I think it's something that can be related to a lot of people. So folks, we'll wrap it up here. What's next for you? Are you just still trying to push this project? You got something coming up,
Well, I mean,
album or, you know?
the real push really just started. I mean,
Mhm.
this goes back to I completed, even after I finished the animation, like I think early, well, late 2018. But what continued was that I actually there's a whole other ending that I'm sure you might have seen on the
Yeah, I
Blu-ray.
saw the different end. I
That
saw the
ending, and I was like,
ending.
I was so happy I was done with it. But as the next month went, I was like, it's just not right. Why can't I just be happy with it? I was like, it's just not right. And then I had an idea. I was like, that's how it should end, not like that. And I was like, fuck, I just couldn't let it go. So I just spent another 3, 4 months or whatever it was
Sure.
animating a whole nother end when I thought I was done. So
Mhm.
and then I also, since technology came further, I redid all the guitars and bass
For sure.
and
Mhm.
vocals.
Yeah.
I redid all that stuff except for the lead
Wow.
guitars. Um, After I finished that, and so the movie was done, and I went literally to get the music mastered right when New York City shut down for the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, sure.
And so then that kind of delayed things I was going to do with it, and then I started eventually putting it into film festivals, and that went through all 2021. And then I kind of did a little bit of a release on my own, I think in late 2020 or something like that,
Mhm.
and first sold things. But then I stopped because people were like, "You should get a distributor," and if they don't won't want you selling it on your own, so I stopped all
Yeah.
that. And went through that hamster wheel for a couple of years, and eventually, I had it on Tubi for a while and Roku channel and stuff, but it's like you can't communicate with people that way. You can't find out who the fans are, who gets into it. So I pulled it off those, started doing the push that you ended up rediscovering it that way, I guess, and buying the
Yeah.
Blu-ray. And that I started about 2 months ago. So that's been, and it's been going really good.
Well, that's
For
good.
what I can afford budget
Sure.
wise, advertising for it and stuff on Facebook. And so that's been the big focus. And I just released, at the same time I did that, I released my first CD that I've done since then, which is my
Oh, nice.
self-titled Röckët Stähr CD, and people are digging that a lot. And my plan is to release a CD about every year, year and a half going
Mhm.
forward for a good number of years. I've got a ton of songs, and not the next one, but the one after it, maybe
Mhm.
2, 3 years, is going to be probably the first half of another rock opera
Oh, nice.
that I'm working on.
Sure.
But it's going to be a lot different than this one,
Sure.
a lot more fucked up. A
Nothing
lot,
wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
yeah. There's some things of it that I don't want to give away yet as to what
Sure.
some of the stuff that it's going to be. It's going to be a little more straightforward rock. I don't think there's going to be really
Mhm.
any work. There might be some orchestration. I don't know. Right now, I'm not thinking anything. It's going to be much more straightforward,
Sure.
but a very strange story. And I'll probably release it as two different records. One, the first
Mhm.
half, and I'll put something else out when I'm working on the second half.
Sure.
So kind of a whole plan I have going forward, and it sort of depends on how big my fan base gets with what I'm doing, as the movie is sort of the thing that I hope to bring people into my Rocket Star world with, and hopefully then they're like, well, how do you like these songs? If you like those, You'll probably like my self-titled CD as well, and you probably like this, next one I'm gonna do, because
Mhm.
a lot of the songs on those are songs I wrote back when I wrote a lot of the songs for Death of a Rockstar. It's not like I was like, here's my best songs, I'm gonna put them all on here.
Sure.
It's just more of like, oh, this works for here, that works for here, that works for this, and I still have a shit ton of songs from those same periods that
Sure.
and new ones that I'm writing as well that go on. So
As every creative does when you have so many ideas and only so much time, right?
yeah. You thought you were wrapping things up, and then I went on for another 10
Oh,
minutes.
not at all. No worries. No, that's. But I was curious, so we'll look forward to that. Is Death of the Rockstar, is the soundtrack available yet? Or
Is yes, a two CD soundtrack is available at my web store, deathofarockstore.com. And there's my ads that are going all through Facebook. And on those ads, if you buy the DVD or Blu-ray, it'll take you to another page with a special offer for that soundtrack.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's out there. And I always get asked a lot about a vinyl release of it.
That's pricey though.
And it'll be pricey, so it depends. I've got to get enough
Sure.
fans built up for
Mhm.
it. But I really want to do it. I might experiment first with doing a vinyl release later this year of my
Sure.
new self-titled CD. But I have ideas if I can fit it all on the two records. It's 90 minutes long, so it's
Right.
it's right at the edge of how much will fit on a double record.
Sure.
Um, I plan on doing that in hopefully about 2 years, making a really special
Well,
product that the fans I think are gonna love, and I have some ideas for that to make it really cool with a poster that might come in it and stuff like that, like in the '70s.
well, I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that because I became a vinyl head over the last 8 years now, and I can't stop myself now.
I
So
wish I could, but I live like in a little studio apartment, and I don't have room for a record player. It
sure.
really it's amazing. I get stuff done. My wife is very tolerant with me doing all this, considering the space we live in. But we both want that. So in a few years, when we move to a bigger place, we'll probably get a record player, and I'll start because I mean, not just how great vinyl is, but all these remasters that are coming out in the last
Mhm.
few years, the whole
Well,
Zeppelin catalog and the Queen catalog, the
mhm.
AC/DC stuff, my
Well,
love, Appetite for Destruction, the whole Beatles catalog, all those remasters. I'd love to own all those and listen.
mhm.
My friend Phil, the guy who
Yeah.
helped me out, the consultation on my movie, he played me some of he has the Beatles
Oh,
remasters,
sure.
and they also come with like the surround sound
Mhm.
ones that Giles Martin did. And as much of a purist as I am with my music, and much of a music snob I am, those things are fucking amazing.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of can't believe it's like, wow, he really is his father's son. He
Yeah.
is the greatest keeper of that legacy because he did an incredible job. And hearing that stuff on vinyl was like, oh, man, I got to get on board.
Yeah. Well, and
I,
that
I
was
have a few records. You can't see it right behind
uh,
the computer up on
yeah.
my mantle. I still have now 8 or 9 of my old records, and right there is Dawkins' Dream Warriors single.
Oh,
I
nice.
bought that in 1987 in the record store when I was, I don't know,
Oh,
13 years old or whatever I was,
that's
and still have it. It's sitting right out there, the
that's
original. It's a 12 inch.
yeah, the 12-inch thing. Oh, that's gorgeous. I'm envious of you. I have a lot of vinyl, and I'm like, oh, you got Doc and Dream Warriors. That just
The original one that I bought myself back in the day.
one of the best songs to ever come out of horror films in general
Oh,
is just
so awesome. I wish the rest of their catalog was just like that song.
yeah, yeah. But
Got
they
some
threw
good songs, but like for some reason, it's like it was never quite like that one. It's so cool, and the video
oh, the
is
video's
so
awesome. Yeah.
perfect along with it. It's so good when George Lynch comes out of the wall, and the snake Freddy comes out and pulls him back through.
Oh
It's just
yeah.
great.
It's awesome. And well, that's why I love AC/DC because one of my favorite movies that makes my friends' eyes roll is I love Maximum Overdrive. I
Oh yeah,
love that movie, and
I
one of the
should
reasons
visit it. Is it does it hold up? I mean, I saw literally when it came out in the movies, and I don't remember thinking too much. I was a horror head in the '80s,
sure.
horror.
Oh yeah, we all were. Yeah.
Yeah, the '80s was like my big. Till I got into rock and roll, that was my big love. That and mid '80s top 40 radio, and that of course I had to go see that the first weekend it came
Yeah.
out. And I don't remember thinking too much of it, but I know the whole soundtrack is who made
AC,
who and all
yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
It's like AC/DC's greatest hits. They only recorded, and they've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
it in the liner notes in the remastered too. They talk about the only three songs are original, everything else is re-released stuff. And as a kid, I didn't know that. I discovered this, album, this movie. I loved it. I got the album, and I just fell in love with AC/DC stuff. I'm like,
Oh, nice, nice.
this stuff is amazing. So when they did a remastered, I picked it up and listening to it. And you're right about the remasters with these vinyl. It's like you're listening to it for the first time. I listen to a wide range of music. So I also grew up with Beastie Boys and rap. So and
Who
they
didn't have that if you were a teenager in the 80s?
and
Come
so
on.
I picked up the 30th anniversary remaster of License to Ill, and then it was like listening to it for the first time because I'm just listening to it going, I didn't hear that instrument before or that noise or
I know.
that beat,
Yeah.
stuff that I think people are now appreciating.
But back then we were
And
listening to it on cassette tapes half the time.
I've still got my
Be
cassette
like
tape.
almost nothing but hits.
I still got my cassette tape of
And
it.
then
I
it gets wrapped
absolutely.
up in the thing, and you gotta get your pencil out and then twist it back up, and so then it loses more sound quality. But they still keep putting it in there, like
the, the struggle is real. But thank you so much, Rocket Star. Folks, check it out, Death of a Rock Star. I will put links to all your stuff so where you can find this, where you can pick up the Blu-ray and the soundtrack, and we'll keep an eye on your stuff. And yeah, when you release your album on vinyl or whatnot, or maybe we could definitely touch base another time, talk more music. I'd love to.
awesome. I'd love to. I love talking music, so I mean, I'm always up for this. But if you're talking classic rock or anything from the '60s, '70s, and '80s, what have you,
Oh yeah.
I'm your guy. I'm totally up for coming on and just talking that.
Definitely up for that. So check it out, folks, and thank you, Rocket Star, and all that links and everything. So thank you, and rock on, man.